As you can probably gather from the name of this channel, I usually make some videos that skip over some of the basics and make content that is a bit more well in depth. But since I have had some requests in the comments to make a video that goes over the basics of cinematography, I thought I'd do just that, as the role that the cinematographer takes on is a fairly technical and complex one. It's a bit tricky to distill all the nuanced things that they do into a single YouTube video. However, I think that the most important duties of a director of photography can best be distilled into three basic elements: exposure, lighting, and camera positioning and movement. These three elements align with the three departments on a film set which the DP manages: the camera, lighting, and group departments. To be a cinematographer, you need to be able to control all three of these elements and manipulate them in order to capture a visual style which suits the story being told. So let's focus on each one of these departments or aspect of cinematography to show why they are crucial in order to fulfill the deepest overarching function of building and capturing the look of a film. Let's start off with a fairly necessary feature of cinematography: the camera. To capture an image, light passes through a glass lens and hits the film plane, which could house a digital sensor or film stock. How the footage will look is determined by the amount of light that hits the focal plane and sensitivity of how easily the digital sensor or the film stock absorbs that kind of light. This is exposure, okay? It refers to the amount of light that is exposed to the film plane. Letting in more light will result in a brighter exposure, and letting in less light will mean a darker exposure. One of the most important parts of a cinematographer's job is measuring and ensuring the correct exposure is achieved. A simple example can be found in comedies versus horror films. Typically, comedies have a brighty, exposed image which reflects the light, comedic tone of the story, while horror films often have a darker exposure, which sets a broader, scarier psychological tone. To control exposure with the camera, the cinematographer can adjust three different variables: the shutter and the aperture and the ISO. ISO is not that the international standard organization and all that. If you want to know the ISO, you have to check my previous videos. Motion picture cameras usually use a rotary disc shutter. This is a semicircular disc that spins in front of the film gate. When the disc passes the film gate, light will be blocked and not let in. As it turns, there will be an open section where light will be able to hit the film plane. Since the shutter takes up a percentage of a circle and film cameras, it is measured in degrees, which is referred to as the shutter angle. Adjusting the shutter angle affects the amount of time that film exposed to light. So making the angle smaller Like 45 degrees means that the rotating shutter will block more light. Therefore, the exposure will be darker, inversely making the shutter angle bigger. Like 270 degrees means that more light will be let through and that the exposure will be lighter. The shutter angle also controls the secondary functions of motion blur. A smaller shutter angle will constrict motion blur and make footage feel choppier, while a larger shutter angle will increase motion blur. Conventionally, the shutter is therefore kept at 180 degrees, which makes movement feel normal to the human eye. Cinematographers therefore primarily use the two other variables of aperture and film speed to control exposure. Aperture in the hole in the lens that can be opened or closed to let in more or less light. On cinema lenses, this value is measured as a T stop and as an f stop on still photography lenses or glasses, whatever you can say. Opening the aperture, shooting with a smaller stop number means the hole is large and more light is going to letting in. Closing down the aperture or aperture, shooting at a deep stop makes the hole smaller and it lets in less light. Finally, the ISO or film speed refers to how sensitively the digital sensor or film stock responds to light. A low film speed such as 50 ISO is less sensitive, so will be darker, and a high film speed such as 800 ISO will be brighter. So, to expose an image which is not too bright and not too dark, cinematographers will manipulate this exposure triangle of shutter angle, aperture, and film speed until the footage has the correctly exposed look. So thanks for listening me peacefully and patiently so far. The next part will be updated soon. Thanks. Watch my channel and subscribe and listen to my audio and visuals. Many more to come.